Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical component for a Class Roman II medical device is supplied by a new vendor with a recently implemented quality management system. The vendor provides a certificate of analysis, CO-A, for each lot, but has not undergone an on-site audit by the device manufacturer. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance with CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, supplier controls? Option A. Accept the vendor's certificate of analysis for each lot and continue with routine incoming inspections without further supplier qualification. Option B. Conduct a risk-based on-site audit of the supplier's quality system, focusing on areas related to the critical components manufacturing and quality control processes. Option C. Rely solely on the vendor's self-declaration of compliance with relevant ISO standards, assuming their quality system is adequate. Option D. Immediately terminate the relationship with the new vendor due to the lack of an on-site audit history. The correct answer is B. Conduct a risk-based on-site audit of the supplier's quality system, focusing on areas related to the critical components manufacturing and quality control processes. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing, ensuring the quality and reliability of components sourced from external suppliers. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operations and cost-effectiveness with the absolute requirement to maintain product safety and effectiveness, as mandated by CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR. A robust supplier management program is critical to mitigating risks associated with outsourced components, as a failure in a supplier's process can directly lead to a non-conforming medical device. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate level of oversight and control for each supplier based on the criticality of the component they provide and the supplier's own quality system. The correct approach, which involves a risk-based assessment of supplier quality systems and the criticality of the components they supply, represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the principles of CFR Part 8. Specifically, 21 CFR 820-50 Supplier Controls mandates that an organization establish and maintain procedures to ensure that all purchased or otherwise received product and services conform to specified requirements. A risk-based approach allows for the allocation of resources to suppliers and components that pose the greatest potential risk to device safety and effectiveness. This proactive strategy ensures that controls are commensurate with the level of risk, preventing potential quality issues before they impact the final product. Ethically, this approach prioritizes patient safety by systematically addressing potential vulnerabilities in the supply chain. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the supplier's self-certification without independent verification fails to meet the requirements of 21 CFR 820-50. This regulatory failure stems from the fact that the manufacturer retains ultimate responsibility for the quality of the finished device, regardless of where components are sourced. Relying solely on a supplier's assurance without due diligence is a breach of this responsibility. Ethically, this approach is unacceptable as it outsources critical quality assurance functions without adequate oversight, potentially exposing patients to harm. Another incorrect approach, which involves conducting extensive audits of every supplier regardless of the criticality of their component or their historical performance, is inefficient and may not be the most effective use of resources. While thoroughness is important, 21 CFR 820-50 implies a need for controls that are appropriate to the risk. An indiscriminate, one-size-fits-all auditing strategy can divert resources from high-risk areas and may not be the most effective way to manage supplier quality. Ethically, while well-intentioned, this approach can lead to wasted resources that could be better applied to more critical supplier relationships or other quality system elements. A third incorrect approach, which involves terminating relationships with suppliers who have had even minor, non-critical deviations without a thorough risk assessment, can be detrimental to business continuity and may not be regulatory compliant. While deviations must be addressed, the response should be proportionate to the risk and impact. 21 CFR 820-50 requires controls, not necessarily immediate termination for every minor issue. Ethically, this approach can be seen as overly punitive and may damage valuable supplier relationships without a clear justification based on risk to device quality or patient safety. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment. This begins with identifying all suppliers and the components or services they provide. Next, the criticality of each component or service to the safety and effectiveness of the medical device must be determined. Then, the supplier's quality system and historical performance should be evaluated. Based on this risk assessment, appropriate controls such as supplier qualification, audits, incoming inspection, and performance monitoring should be established and documented. This process ensures that resources are focused on managing the most significant risks, thereby fulfilling regulatory requirements and upholding ethical responsibilities to patient safety. Question 2. The performance metrics show a consistent trend of increased scrap rates in a specific manufacturing process for a Class Roman II medical device. Which of the following actions best aligns with the requirements of CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, for addressing this situation? Option A. Immediately implement a new, less expensive raw material supplier for the affected component, assuming this will reduce costs and potentially the scrap rate. Option B. Initiate a formal corrective and preventive action (CAPA) investigation to identify the root cause of the increased scrap rate, document findings, and implement validated corrective actions. Option C. Adjust the quality control inspection criteria to accept a higher tolerance for the defect causing the scrap, thereby reducing the reported scrap rate. Option D. Temporarily halt production of the affected device until the cause of the increased scrap rate can be determined through informal discussions with the production team. The correct answer is A. Immediately implement a new, less expensive raw material supplier for the affected component, assuming this will reduce costs and potentially the scrap rate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of the quality system regulation, QSR, specifically CFR Part 8, to ensure compliance while optimizing processes. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operations with the absolute requirement to maintain the integrity and safety of medical devices, as mandated by the QSR. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement improvements that do not compromise regulatory adherence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the observed performance metrics by initiating a thorough investigation rooted in the QSR's requirements for corrective and preventive actions, CAPA. This aligns with 21 CFR 820-100, which mandates a system for CAPA to investigate and correct nonconformities and prevent their recurrence. By focusing on root cause analysis and implementing validated changes, this approach ensures that any process optimization is done in a controlled and documented manner, thereby upholding the QSR's emphasis on product quality and patient safety. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction, without a thorough CAPA investigation, fails to address the underlying issues that may have led to the performance metrics. This could result in superficial fixes that do not resolve the root cause, potentially leading to recurring problems or even new nonconformities, violating the spirit and letter of 21 CFR 820-100. Another incorrect approach that bypasses formal change control procedures, even if seemingly efficient, introduces significant regulatory risk. Such actions circumvent the documented review and approval processes required by 21 CFR 820-70, production and process controls, and 21 CFR 820-75, validation, which are critical for ensuring that changes do not adversely affect device quality. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of performance data against QSR requirements. When deviations or suboptimal performance are identified, the first step should always be to determine if a nonconformity exists and if a CAPA is warranted under 21 CFR 820-100. This involves understanding the scope of the issue, identifying potential root causes, and then developing and implementing solutions that are validated and documented according to the QSR. Prioritizing patient safety and product quality, while also seeking efficiency, requires a commitment to rigorous adherence to the established regulatory framework. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a series of bench tests were conducted to confirm that the device's critical performance parameters, as specified in the design input requirements, were met. Following these tests, a usability study was performed with a small group of representative users to gather feedback on the device's ease of use and overall satisfaction. Based on the QSR, Which of the following best categorizes these activities? Option A. Both the bench tests and the usability study represent design verification. Option B. The bench tests represent design validation, and the usability study represents design verification. Option C. The bench tests represent design verification, and the usability study represents design validation. Option D. Both the bench tests and the usability study represent design validation. The correct answer is C. The bench tests represent design verification, and the usability study represents design validation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the distinction between design verification and design validation within the context of the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR, 21 CFR Part 8. The core difficulty lies in correctly categorizing activities and ensuring that both aspects of the design process are adequately addressed to demonstrate that the device meets user needs and intended uses. Misinterpreting these phases can lead to significant regulatory noncompliance and potential patient safety risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it accurately aligns the performed activities with the regulatory definitions of verification and validation. Design verification, as defined in 21 CFR 820:30 F, confirms that the design output meets the design input requirements. This involves objective evidence that the design output has fulfilled the design input requirements. Design validation, as defined in 21 CFR 820:30 G, confirms that the device conforms to its user needs and intended uses. This typically involves clinical evaluations or simulated use studies. By correctly identifying and executing these distinct but complementary activities, the manufacturer ensures that the device is not only built correctly, verification, but also that it is the correct device for its intended purpose and users, validation. This systematic approach is fundamental to the QSR's objective of ensuring device safety and effectiveness. An incorrect approach that conflates verification and validation activities fails to meet the regulatory requirements of 21 CFR 820:30 F and 21 CFR 820:30 G. For instance, relying solely on laboratory testing verification without confirming user needs through clinical or simulated use, validation, represents a failure to demonstrate that the device is suitable for its intended use and will meet user needs. This is a direct violation of the validation requirement. Conversely, conducting user feedback sessions without confirming that the design outputs meet the specified design inputs, verification, means the device may not be manufactured consistently or reliably, even if it appears to meet user needs in initial feedback. This is a failure of the verification requirement. Both scenarios demonstrate a lack of adherence to the QSR's structured approach to design controls, potentially leading to the release of unsafe or ineffective medical devices. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the definitions and objectives of design verification and validation, as outlined in 21 CFR Part 8. Professionals must meticulously review design inputs and outputs to determine which activities are necessary to confirm that the design outputs meet the design inputs, verification. Subsequently, they must plan and execute activities that confirm the device meets user needs and intended uses, often involving end users or representative scenarios, validation. A robust design history file, DHF, should clearly document these distinct activities and their outcomes, providing objective evidence of compliance. When in doubt, consulting the specific language of 21 CFR 820:30 and relevant FDA guidance documents is crucial. Question 4. Investigation of a customer complaint alleging a specific malfunction in a Class Roman II medical device, which, if it occurs, could lead to patient injury, requires the quality unit to take immediate action. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response in accordance with Title 21, Part 820? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation including a comprehensive risk assessment to determine the potential impact on patient safety and the scope of the issue, followed by the implementation of appropriate corrective and preventive actions. Option B. Classify the complaint as a minor issue and implement a simple documentation update without further investigation, assuming it is an isolated user error. Option C. Conduct a brief internal review of the complaint data and if no immediate safety concern is apparent from the limited review, proceed with routine product monitoring. Option D. Immediately issue a voluntary recall of all distributed units of the affected device to prevent any potential patient harm. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation including a comprehensive risk assessment to determine the potential impact on patient safety and the scope of the issue, followed by the implementation of appropriate corrective and preventive actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, managing the risk associated with a potential design defect identified post-market. The challenge lies in balancing the need for prompt corrective action to protect patient safety with the regulatory requirements for thorough investigation and documentation under 21 CFR Part 820. A hasty or incomplete response could lead to continued patient harm and regulatory noncompliance, while an overly protracted investigation could delay necessary actions. The pressure to resolve the issue efficiently while adhering to the Quality System Regulation, QSR, demands a systematic and risk-based approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal investigation under the complaint handling procedures outlined in 21 CFR 820, 198. This investigation must include a thorough risk assessment as mandated by 21 CFR 820, 30G, design controls, and 21 CFR 820, 100, COPPA. The risk assessment should evaluate the likelihood of the defect occurring, the severity of potential harm to patients, and the effectiveness of existing controls. Based on this assessment, appropriate corrective and preventive actions, COPPA, must be determined and implemented, including potential reporting to the FDA if the defect is reportable under 21 CFR 803, medical device reporting. This systematic, risk-based approach ensures that actions taken are proportionate to the identified risk and that all regulatory requirements are met, prioritizing patient safety and product quality. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a product recall immediately without a formal risk assessment is an incorrect approach. While a recall might ultimately be necessary, initiating it prematurely without understanding the scope and severity of the risk can lead to unnecessary disruption, cost, and potential loss of market confidence. Bypasses the regulatory requirement for a thorough investigation and risk evaluation, potentially failing to identify the root cause or the most effective solution. Ignoring the complaint and assuming it is an isolated incident without further investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. 21 CFR 820, 198 requires that all complaints be reviewed and investigated. Failing to do so violates the QSR, potentially leaving patients at risk from a systemic defect. This approach demonstrates a disregard for patient safety and regulatory obligations. Conducting a superficial review of the complaint and implementing a minor procedural change without a comprehensive risk assessment or root cause analysis is also incorrect. This approach fails to adequately address the potential for recurrence and may not mitigate the actual risk to patients. It falls short of the requirements for effective COPPA under 21 CFR 820, 100 and the design control requirements for risk management under 21 CFR 820, 30G. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should first activate the established complaint handling procedure. This involves documenting the complaint thoroughly and initiating an investigation. The core of the investigation must be a robust risk assessment, drawing upon design control principles and COPPA requirements. This assessment should guide the decision-making process regarding the appropriate corrective actions, which may range from further investigation to product modification, recall, or regulatory reporting. The decision-making process should be iterative, with findings from the risk assessment informing the selection and implementation of COPPA and the effectiveness of COPPA being verified. Throughout this process, adherence to the documentation requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 is paramount. Question 5. What factors determine the appropriate individual or function to assign responsibility for the complaint handling process within a medical device company's quality management system, in accordance with CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR? Option A. The department with the least workload at the time the responsibility needs to be assigned. Option B. The documented quality management system, procedures, and organizational structure that define roles and responsibilities for critical processes. Option C. The individual who previously held a similar role in a different department, assuming their experience is transferable. Option D. The individual who has demonstrated the most initiative in addressing customer concerns in the past, regardless of formal designation. The correct answer is B. The documented quality management system, procedures, and organizational structure that define roles and responsibilities for critical processes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a quality manager to navigate the complexities of assigning responsibility for a critical QMS process, complaint handling, without clear documented delegation. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operations with the absolute requirement for defined roles and responsibilities, as mandated by the Quality System Regulation, QSR. Misinterpreting or neglecting these requirements can lead to significant compliance gaps, potential product safety issues, and regulatory enforcement actions. The absence of explicit delegation creates ambiguity, which is a direct contravention of the QSR's emphasis on a well-defined and controlled quality system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach is to consult the quality management system, QMS, documentation, specifically the quality manual and associated procedures, to identify the officially designated individual or function responsible for complaint handling. This aligns directly with 21 CFR Part 820, 20A, which requires management to establish and maintain a quality system. This section, along with 21 CFR Part 820, 25B on training, implicitly mandates that responsibilities must be defined and understood. By referring to the documented QMS, the quality manager ensures that the assignment of responsibility is based on established procedures and organizational structure, not on assumptions or informal agreements. This upholds the principle of a controlled and documented quality system, ensuring accountability and preventing gaps in critical processes. Incorrect approach is analysis. Assigning the responsibility based on who has the most available time or who is perceived to be most capable without consulting the QMS represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the established procedures for defining roles and responsibilities, creating an ad hoc system that is not controlled or documented as required by the QSR. It violates 21 CFR Part 820, 20A, by not having a clearly defined and maintained quality system with assigned responsibilities. Ethically, it can lead to a lack of accountability and potential neglect of critical tasks, impacting product safety and patient well-being. Assuming the previous incumbent's responsibilities automatically transfer to a new role without formal QMS updates is also a failure. The QSR requires that changes to the QMS, including the assignment of responsibilities, be documented and controlled. Relying on past practices without current QMS validation is a direct violation of 21 CFR Part 820, 20A, and 21 CFR Part 820, 70B, concerning management of process changes. This can lead to confusion, duplicated efforts, or critical tasks being overlooked, all of which undermine the integrity of the quality system. Delegating the responsibility to a subordinate without a clear understanding of their current workload or training for complaint handling, and without formal documentation, is another failure. While delegation is a management tool, it must be executed within the framework of the QMS. This approach neglects the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, 25B, regarding adequate training, and 21 CFR Part 820, 20A for defined responsibilities. It can result in the subordinate being overwhelmed, inadequately trained, or not officially recognized as responsible, leading to potential noncompliance and compromised complaint handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework. First, they must identify the governing regulations. In this case, the FDA's Quality System Regulation, 21 CFR Part 820. Second, they should consult the organization's own documented QMS, which is designed to implement these regulations. This includes reviewing the quality manual, organizational charts, and specific process procedures related to complaint handling. Third, if the QMS documentation is unclear or outdated, the professional should initiate the process for updating the QMS to reflect current organizational responsibilities, ensuring proper documentation and management approval. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are compliant, accountable, and contribute to the overall effectiveness and integrity of the quality system. Question 6. When evaluating the regulatory requirements for a novel medical device intended for commercial distribution within the United States, which of the following best reflects the absolute priority of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and its role in ensuring device safety and effectiveness? Option A. A device's compliance with its internal quality management system, as outlined in CFR Part 8, is the sole determinant of its readiness for the U.S. market. Option B. The FDA's involvement is primarily advisory, offering guidance to manufacturers rather than mandating specific approval processes for market entry. Option C. The FDA's primary role is to review and approve or clear medical devices for marketing, ensuring they meet established safety and effectiveness standards before they can be legally distributed in the U.S. Option D. Industry self-regulation and voluntary adherence to best practices are sufficient to guarantee a medical device's safety and effectiveness for U.S. consumers. Correct answer is C. The FDA's primary role is to review and approve or clear medical devices for marketing, ensuring they meet established safety and effectiveness standards before they can be legally distributed in the U.S. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for medical device manufacturers, navigating the regulatory landscape to ensure compliance and patient safety. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the distinct yet interconnected roles of different entities within the U.S. medical device regulatory framework, specifically the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. A deep understanding of the FDA's authority, its mandate under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, FD&C Act, and its implementation through regulations like the Quality System Regulation, QSR, is crucial for making sound decisions. The correct approach demonstrates a thorough understanding of the FDA's oversight function. The FDA's primary role is to protect public health by ensuring that medical devices are safe and effective. This involves pre-market review, post-market surveillance, and enforcement of regulations. Recognizing that the FDA is the ultimate authority for approving or clearing devices for marketing in the U.S. is paramount. This approach correctly identifies that any device intended for commercial distribution in the U.S. must fall under the FDA's purview, regardless of its perceived novelty or the manufacturer's internal quality processes. Incorrect approaches fail to grasp the fundamental authority of the FDA. One incorrect approach might suggest that a device's internal quality system alone is sufficient for market entry, overlooking the statutory requirement for FDA review or clearance. This represents a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses a critical safeguard designed to protect the public. Another incorrect approach might misinterpret the role of other governmental or industry bodies, assuming their approval supersedes the FDA's. This is an ethical and regulatory failure, because it prioritizes a potentially incomplete or unauthorized pathway over the established legal requirements for medical device marketing. A third incorrect approach might involve assuming that a device not explicitly listed as requiring pre-market approval is automatically exempt from FDA oversight, ignoring the broad scope of the FDA's authority over all medical devices. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the tiered regulatory system and the general applicability of the QSR. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify the product as a medical device under FDA definitions. Second, determine the appropriate regulatory pathway, e.g., Pre-Market Notification 510(k), Pre-Market Approval PMA, de novo classification. Third, ensure all applicable QSR requirements are met throughout the device lifecycle. Finally, engage with the FDA as necessary for clarification or guidance. This process ensures that decisions are grounded in regulatory requirements and ethical considerations for patient safety. Question 7. The monitoring system demonstrates a minor software update intended to improve user interface responsiveness. Which of the following actions best aligns with the design change documentation requirements of CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR? Option A. Relying solely on the software development team's internal testing to validate the update without formal documentation of the change or its impact assessment. Option B. Implementing the software update and updating the user manual to reflect the changes without further formal documentation of the design change process. Option C. Conducting a thorough design review to assess the impact of the software update on the device's safety, effectiveness, and regulatory classification, documenting the review findings, the rationale for the change, and any necessary revalidation activities in the design history file, DHF. Option D, releasing the software update to the market immediately to enhance user experience, with the intention of documenting the change retrospectively if any issues arise. The correct answer is B, implementing the software update and updating the user manual to reflect the changes, without further formal documentation of the design change process. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in medical device development, managing design changes effectively and compliantly. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for innovation and improvement with the stringent requirements of the Quality System Regulation, QSR, specifically CFR Part 8, which mandates robust documentation and control over design changes to ensure device safety and effectiveness. A failure to properly document and assess design changes can lead to the distribution of non-conforming devices, regulatory non-compliance, and potential harm to patients. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the principles of design control outlined in CFR Part 8. This involves a systematic process of evaluating the impact of a proposed design change on the device's safety, effectiveness, and regulatory status. Documenting this evaluation, including the rationale for the change and any necessary revalidation or verification activities, is crucial for demonstrating compliance and maintaining the integrity of the design history file, DHF. This proactive and thorough approach minimizes risks and ensures that any modifications do not compromise the device's intended performance or introduce new hazards. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately documents the design change process represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Failing to assess the impact of a change on safety and effectiveness directly violates the intent of CFR Part 8, which is to ensure that devices are safe and perform as intended. Not documenting the change, or documenting it superficially, prevents proper traceability and oversight, making it impossible to demonstrate compliance during an FDA inspection. Ethically, this failure can lead to the distribution of devices with unknown risks, potentially endangering patient health. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a thorough understanding of the design change's potential impact. This involves 1. Clearly defining the proposed change. 2. Systematically evaluating its potential effects on device performance, safety, and regulatory classification. 3. Determining the necessary verification and validation activities. 4. Meticulously documenting all aspects of the change process. And 5. Obtaining appropriate approvals before implementing the change. This structured approach ensures that all regulatory requirements are met and that the device's quality and safety are maintained. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that a medical device manufacturer has made several minor but necessary updates to the manufacturing process for an existing device. These updates have been implemented on the production line to improve efficiency. The Quality Assurance (QA) department is now tasked with updating the design history file, DHF, to reflect these changes. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR? Option A. The manufacturing engineer who identified the process improvements directly updates the DHF with the new information, assuming the changes are minor and beneficial. Option B. The QA department initiates a formal change control process, ensuring all proposed DHF revisions are reviewed and approved by relevant stakeholders, including engineering and manufacturing, before being officially incorporated into the DHF with documented justification and revision history. Option C. The QA department approves the DHF updates based solely on the word of the manufacturing engineer who implemented the changes, without independent verification or review from other departments. Option D. The QA department updates the DHF with the new process information, but does not formally document the revision history or the specific rationale for each change, as the changes are considered self-explanatory. The correct answer is B. The QA department initiates a formal change control process, ensuring all proposed DHF revisions are reviewed and approved by relevant stakeholders, including engineering and manufacturing, before being officially incorporated into the DHF with documented justification and revision history. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated industries, ensuring that critical documentation, like design history files, DHF, accurately reflects the current state of a medical device and its manufacturing processes. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely updates with the rigorous requirements for document control and approval mandated by the Quality System Regulation, QSR. A failure to properly manage document revisions can lead to non-compliance, product quality issues, and potential patient safety risks. The pressure to release a product quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts in established procedures, making adherence to the QSR paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review and approval process for all changes to the DHF, ensuring that each revision is properly documented, justified, and approved by qualified personnel. This aligns directly with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, specifically concerning document control and records. The QSR mandates that all documents be reviewed and approved before issuance, and that changes to documents be reviewed, approved, and documented. This systematic approach ensures that the DHF remains an accurate and complete representation of the device's design and manufacturing, which is essential for regulatory compliance, post-market surveillance, and future design changes. It upholds the integrity of the quality system. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves implementing the changes directly to the DHF without a formal review and approval process. This bypasses the established document control procedures required by 21 CFR Part 820, 181, Design History File, and 21 CFR Part 820, 40, Document Controls. Such an action creates a significant risk of introducing unverified or inadequately reviewed changes, potentially compromising the device's safety and effectiveness. It also undermines the integrity of the quality system by circumventing its core control mechanisms. Another incorrect approach is to approve the changes based solely on the word of the engineer who made them, without any independent verification or review by other relevant departments, e.g., Quality Assurance Manufacturing, QSR, under 21 CFR Part 820, 40, requires that changes be reviewed and approved by appropriate functions. Relying on a single individual's assertion, especially for critical design documentation, is a failure of due diligence and a violation of the collaborative review process essential for robust quality management. This can lead to errors being overlooked and a false sense of compliance. A third incorrect approach is to update the DHF with the new information, but not formally document the revision history or the rationale for the changes. 21 CFR Part 820, 40b explicitly states that changes to documents shall be reviewed, approved, and documented. Failing to document the revision history and the justification for changes means that the DHF does not provide a clear audit trail of how the design evolved, making it difficult to trace decisions, assess the impact of changes, or respond to regulatory inquiries. This lack of documentation is a direct contravention of the QSR's record-keeping requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach document approval and revision processes by strictly adhering to the established procedures outlined in their company's quality management system, QMS, which must be compliant with 21 CFR Part 820. This involves understanding the specific requirements for document control, review, and approval for each type of document, particularly those within the DHF. When faced with a situation requiring DHF updates, the professional decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the specific changes required and their impact. 2. Initiating the formal change control process. 3. Ensuring all required reviews and approvals are obtained from appropriate personnel and departments. 4. Documenting the changes, including the rationale and revision history, in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820, 40. 5. Verifying that the updated DHF accurately reflects the current state of the device. This systematic, documented, and collaborative approach ensures compliance and maintains the integrity of the quality system. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that a manufacturing engineer, in an effort to improve efficiency on a critical assembly line, has made several modifications to the approved work instructions for a Class Roman II medical device. These modifications were not formally documented, reviewed, or approved through the established document control system. Instead, the engineer verbally communicated the changes to the operators performing the assembly. The Device Master Record, DMR, has not been updated to reflect these changes. Which of the following actions best addresses this situation in accordance with CFR Part 8, medical device QSR. Option A. Implement the engineer's modifications immediately and update the DMR to reflect the changes, bypassing the formal review and approval process to expedite production. Option B. Instruct the engineer to verbally communicate the approved work instructions to the operators and to update the DMR based on their understanding of the changes. Option C. Accept the engineer's modifications as they are intended to improve efficiency and instruct the engineer to document the changes retrospectively without formal review, as the operators are already following them. Option D. Immediately revert to the last approved version of the work instructions and initiate a formal change control process for the engineer's proposed modifications, ensuring all changes are documented, reviewed, and approved before implementation. Correct answer is D. Immediately revert to the last approved version of the work instructions and initiate a formal change control process for the engineer's proposed modifications, ensuring all changes are documented, reviewed, and approved before implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, ensuring that changes to critical documentation are properly managed and communicated. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient product development and improvement with the absolute requirement for regulatory compliance and patient safety. A failure in document control can lead to the use of outdated or incorrect procedures, potentially impacting device performance, safety, and the manufacturer's ability to demonstrate compliance with the Quality System Regulation, QSR. The correct approach, which involves a formal review and approval process for all changes to the Device Master Record (DMR) and associated work instructions, represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. 40. Document controls. This regulation mandates that procedures for the identification, documentation, review, approval, release, distribution, and change of documents be established. A formal review ensures that changes are evaluated for their impact on device design, manufacturing, and safety, and that only approved versions are in use. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of errors and ensures traceability. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal review and approval for changes to work instruction, even if the changes are perceived as minor or beneficial by the individual making them, represents a significant regulatory failure. Specifically, it violates 21 CFR 820(40)(a), which requires that each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures to control the identification, documentation, review, approval, release, distribution, and change of documents. Furthermore, it fails to adhere to 21 CFR 820(40)(b) regarding changes, which states that changes to any document shall be reviewed and approved by the same function, S, or organizational unit S, that performed the original review and approval, unless specifically delegated. This bypass creates a risk of using non-conforming or outdated procedures, potentially leading to device non-conformances and posing a risk to patient safety. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on verbal communication of changes to work instructions, is also a critical failure. This method lacks the necessary documentation and traceability required by the QSR. Verbal instructions are prone to misinterpretation, are difficult to verify, and do not provide a record of what was changed, when, or by whom. This directly contravenes the principles of controlled documentation and change management outlined in 21 CFR 820(40). A third incorrect approach, which involves updating the work instruction but not formally reapproving it through the established document control system, also fails to meet regulatory requirements. While the document may be physically updated, the lack of formal reapproval signifies that the change has not undergone the necessary scrutiny to ensure its validity and impact. This means the document may not be considered an approved version, leading to potential compliance issues and the risk of using an unverified procedure. The professional reasoning process for navigating such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the QSR, particularly 21 CFR 820(40). When faced with a proposed change, a professional must ask: 1. Is this change to a controlled document? 2. What is the impact of this change on the device, its manufacturing process, and patient safety? 3. Does the proposed change require a formal review and approval according to our established procedures? 4. Has the change been documented, reviewed, and approved by the appropriate personnel? 5. Is the updated document properly released and distributed to ensure only the current, approved version is in use? Adherence to established procedures, even for seemingly minor changes, is paramount to maintaining a compliant and effective quality system. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates a minor software modification intended to improve data logging efficiency. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with the design and development planning requirements of 21 CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, for this change? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify potential effects of the software modification on the device's intended use, performance, and safety, and document the findings and any necessary verification and validation activities. Option B. Implement the software modification and document the change in the device history record, but forego a detailed impact assessment as it is not explicitly required for minor software updates. Option C. Implement the software modification immediately to enhance efficiency and address any issues that arise post-implementation through subsequent corrective actions. Option D. Proceed with the software modification without a formal impact assessment, assuming the change is too minor to affect the device's overall safety or effectiveness. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify potential effects of the software modification on the device's intended use, performance, and safety, and document the findings and any necessary verification and validation activities. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a manufacturer to proactively identify potential impacts of design changes on the safety and effectiveness of a medical device, as mandated by the Quality System Regulation, QSR. The challenge lies in ensuring that the design and development planning process adequately anticipates and addresses these impacts before they manifest in the final product. A robust design and development plan is crucial for preventing the introduction of new risks or the exacerbation of existing ones. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the principles of risk management and the requirements for design controls outlined in 21 CFR Part 820. 30. By conducting a thorough impact assessment of the proposed software modification, the manufacturer demonstrates a commitment to understanding how the change might affect the device's intended use, performance, and user interface. This proactive evaluation allows for the identification of necessary verification and validation activities, ensuring that the modified device continues to meet its design inputs and user needs, thereby safeguarding patient safety and product effectiveness. This aligns with the fundamental purpose of design controls, to ensure that the device is safe and effective for its intended use. An incorrect approach that fails to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment before proceeding with the software modification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the spirit and letter of 21 CFR Part 820. 30D, which requires that design inputs include requirements for the device's intended use and that design outputs meet these inputs. Without an impact assessment, the manufacturer cannot be certain that the software modification, while seemingly minor, does not inadvertently compromise critical functionalities or introduce new hazards. This could lead to a non-conforming product, potential patient harm, and a failure to comply with regulatory requirements for design changes. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing the change without documenting the rationale or the assessment process, also constitutes a regulatory failure. 21 CFR Part 820. 30I mandates that changes to the design be documented and approved. A lack of documentation means there is no auditable trail demonstrating that the potential impacts were considered and addressed, which is a direct contravention of the QSR. Ethically, it represents a lack of transparency and accountability in the design process. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the immediate functional requirement of the software change without considering broader system implications, is also problematic. Design controls require a holistic view of the device. A change that appears isolated might have cascading effects on other subsystems or the overall performance profile. Failing to consider these broader implications can lead to unforeseen issues that compromise the device's safety and effectiveness, thus failing to meet the design output requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to change control. This begins with a clear understanding of the proposed change and its intended purpose. Next, a risk-based impact assessment should be performed, considering all aspects of the device's design, intended use, and potential interactions. This assessment should identify any potential risks or adverse effects on safety and effectiveness. Based on the assessment, appropriate verification and validation activities should be planned and executed. All steps, including the assessment, the decision to proceed, and the verification/validation results, must be thoroughly documented in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820. 30. Question 11. Governance review demonstrates potential inconsistencies in the application of approved procedures for document revisions and distribution within the medical device manufacturing facility. Considering the strict requirements of CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and maintains the integrity of the quality system? Option A. Conduct a thorough audit of the document control system, comparing current practices against the documented procedures and the requirements of 21 CFR 820/40, and implement targeted corrective actions based on identified deviations. Option B. Archive all historical documents and records related to document revisions and distribution to simplify the current document control process. Option C. Immediately update all existing document control procedures to reflect the observed practices, assuming the current practices are more efficient and effective. Option D. Focus on training personnel on the importance of document control without a formal review of the existing procedures or the implementation of specific corrective actions. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough audit of the document control system, comparing current practices against the documented procedures and the requirements of 21 CFR 820/40, and implement targeted corrective actions based on identified deviations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated industries where the integrity of documentation is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operations with the stringent requirements of the Quality System Regulation, QSR, for document control. A governance review highlighting potential deficiencies in document control necessitates a thorough understanding of CFR Part 8 to identify and rectify these issues before they lead to noncompliance, product recalls, or regulatory action. The professional challenge is to accurately assess the impact of the identified deficiencies and implement corrective actions that are both compliant and sustainable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the existing document control procedures against the requirements of CFR Part 8, specifically focusing on sections related to document and records management. This includes verifying that all documents are reviewed, approved, distributed, and revised in accordance with established procedures. It also entails ensuring that obsolete documents are promptly removed from use and that records are maintained in a legible, readily accessible, and protected manner. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified governance concerns by ensuring adherence to the QSR's foundational principles for maintaining product quality and regulatory compliance. It prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based evaluation to identify the root cause of any deficiencies and to implement effective corrective and preventive actions, COPPA, thereby safeguarding product safety and efficacy. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to dismiss the governance review findings as minor administrative oversights without a detailed investigation. This is a regulatory failure because CFR Part 8 mandates a robust quality system, and any indication of weakness in document control, even if perceived as minor, requires thorough investigation and remediation. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to product safety and regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes to document control procedures, such as simply updating document titles or dates, without addressing the underlying systemic issues identified by the governance review. This is a regulatory failure because it does not demonstrate effective COPPA as required by the QSR. It creates a false sense of compliance while leaving the organization vulnerable to continued noncompliance. Ethically, it is deceptive and undermines the integrity of the quality system. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on external audit preparation by creating new documentation without validating the effectiveness of existing processes or ensuring that the new documentation accurately reflects current practices. This is a regulatory failure because CFR Part 8 requires that procedures be followed and that records accurately reflect the activities performed. It prioritizes appearance over substance, failing to address the actual operational deficiencies. Ethically, it is a misrepresentation of the company's quality system. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a systematic, risk-based approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific findings of the governance review. Second, consult CFR Part 8, particularly Sections 21 CFR 820, 40 Document Controls, and 21 CFR 820, 180-186 records, to identify the precise regulatory requirements implicated. Third, conduct a root cause analysis of any identified deficiencies. Fourth, develop and implement CAPA that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART, and that address the root cause. Finally, verify the effectiveness of the implemented CAPA through reevaluation and ongoing monitoring. This structured decision-making process ensures that actions taken are compliant, effective, and contribute to a sustainable quality system. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that a critical manufacturing process, previously validated according to 21 CFR 820-75, has undergone modifications without a documented revalidation study. What is the most appropriate regulatory and quality system response to ensure continued compliance with the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR? Option A. Continue production while developing a plan for future revalidation, assuming the modifications are minor and unlikely to affect device quality. Option B. Conduct a limited review of the process changes and historical validation data, and if no immediate issues are apparent, proceed with production. Option C. Rely on the original validation data and assume the modifications do not invalidate the process, as long as no adverse events have been reported. Option D. Immediately halt the affected process and initiate a full revalidation study to confirm its ability to consistently produce a device meeting predetermined specifications. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the affected process and initiate a full revalidation study to confirm its ability to consistently produce a device meeting predetermined specifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing, where a critical process, vital for product safety and efficacy, has been modified without adequate revalidation. The audit findings highlight a potential breakdown in the quality system, specifically concerning process control and verification. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate regulatory response to ensure patient safety and compliance with CFR Part 8, balancing the need for continued production with the imperative of robust validation. The professional challenge is to interpret the implications of the audit findings within the strict confines of the QSR and decide on the most compliant and risk-averse course of action. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately halting the affected process and initiating a full revalidation. This aligns directly with the principles of CFR Part 8, which mandates that processes used in manufacturing, processing, packaging, and labeling of a finished device must be validated. Specifically, 21 CFR 820-75A states that, where the results of a process cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection and test, the process shall be validated with a high degree of assurance and confidence that it will consistently produce a product meeting its predetermined specifications. A modification to a critical process, as implied by the audit findings, inherently introduces uncertainty about its consistent performance and ability to meet specifications. Therefore, revalidation is not merely a recommendation, but a regulatory requirement to ensure the process's continued validity and the safety and effectiveness of the device. This approach prioritizes patient safety and regulatory compliance above all else. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on historical validation data and perform only a limited review of the process changes. This fails to acknowledge that changes to a validated process can invalidate its prior validation status. CFR Part 8 requires that changes to a validated process be evaluated, and if the change affects the device's quality, the process must be revalidated. A limited review may not provide the high degree of assurance and confidence required by 21 CFR 820-75A. Another incorrect approach is to continue production while initiating a plan for future revalidation. This is a direct violation of the principle of ensuring process control and product quality before release. Continuing production with an unvalidated or potentially invalidated process poses a significant risk to patient safety and violates the spirit and letter of the QSR, particularly the requirements for process validation and change control. A third incorrect approach is to assume the changes are minor and do not impact device quality without documented evidence and revalidation. The QSR places the burden of proof on the manufacturer to demonstrate that processes consistently produce a product meeting specifications. Without revalidation, this demonstration is incomplete, and the assumption of no impact is a regulatory and ethical failure. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework guided by the QSR. The primary consideration is always patient safety and device effectiveness. When audit findings suggest a potential compromise to a validated process, immediate priority is to halt the process and conduct a thorough investigation. This involves assessing the nature and impact of the process changes. If the changes are significant or their impact cannot be definitively determined through review alone, revalidation is mandatory. The decision-making process should involve cross-functional teams, including quality assurance, engineering, and regulatory affairs, to ensure a comprehensive evaluation and compliant resolution. Documentation of all assessments, decisions, and actions taken is critical for demonstrating compliance during future audits. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with a new user interface element in a Class Roman II medical device. Which of the following documentation and record-keeping approaches best demonstrates compliance with the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR? Option A. Updating the general risk management procedure to include a note about considering user interface elements in future risk assessments. Option B. Documenting only the technical specifications and functional requirements for the new user interface element. Option C. Creating a specific design history file addendum that details the risk assessment for the new element, the implemented mitigation strategies, and the results of verification and validation testing performed on the element's functionality and safety. Option D. Relying solely on the existing general quality system procedures to cover the documentation requirements for this new element, without creating any specific records related to its risk assessment or validation. The correct answer is C. Creating a specific design history file addendum that details the risk assessment for the new element, the implemented mitigation strategies, and the results of verification and validation testing performed on the element's functionality and safety. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with a new feature in a Class Roman II medical device. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a manufacturer to determine the appropriate documentation and record-keeping practices to adequately address the identified risk, balancing thoroughness with efficiency. The challenge lies in interpreting the QSR's requirements for documentation in the context of a specific risk level and ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with regulatory expectations for quality system effectiveness. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified risk by creating and maintaining specific documentation that details the risk assessment, the mitigation strategies implemented, and the verification and validation activities performed to confirm the effectiveness of those mitigations. This aligns with 21 CFR Part 820, 30G, which mandates that design validation include testing of production units under actual or simulated use conditions. Furthermore, 21 CFR Part 820, 181 requires that device history records include or have access to the quality system record, which would encompass design and development records, including risk management documentation. This comprehensive approach ensures traceability, accountability, and provides evidence of a robust quality system that proactively manages risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on updating the risk assessment without documenting the subsequent mitigation and verification activities fails to meet the QSR's requirements for a complete design history file and evidence of design validation. This omission creates a gap in the record, making it impossible to demonstrate that the identified risk has been adequately controlled. Another incorrect approach that relies on general quality system procedures without creating specific records for this particular risk fails to provide the necessary detail and traceability required by the QSR. While general procedures are important, the QSR mandates that records reflect the actual implementation and outcomes of quality system activities, especially concerning risk management. A third incorrect approach that only documents the design of the feature, but not the risk assessment or validation activities related to it, is a significant regulatory failure. This ignores the fundamental principle of risk-based design and development mandated by 21 CFR Part 820-30, which requires consideration of potential hazards and the implementation of controls. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the QSR's requirements for design controls, risk management, and record keeping. When a risk assessment identifies a potential hazard, the process should then move to documenting the evaluation of that risk, the selection and implementation of appropriate mitigation strategies, and the subsequent verification and validation activities to confirm the effectiveness of those strategies. This iterative process, supported by detailed and traceable records, is crucial for demonstrating compliance and ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices. Question 14. System analysis indicates that a medical device manufacturer is evaluating its current quality management system, QMS, implementation. The company has a comprehensive set of documented procedures and work instructions that are readily available. However, during internal audits, it is frequently observed that employees do not consistently follow these documented procedures in their daily tasks, and the rationale behind certain quality control steps is not always understood by the personnel performing them. The company is considering two primary approaches to address this situation. Approach 1. Focus on updating and expanding the documentation to include more detailed explanations and visual aids, assuming that clearer instructions will lead to better adherence. Approach 2. Implement a robust training program that emphasizes the why behind each quality procedure, focusing on the impact of adherence on device safety and effectiveness, and establish mechanisms for feedback and continuous improvement of the documented procedures based on employee input and observed deviations. Which approach best aligns with the definition and purpose of a quality management system, QMS, as outlined in CFR Part 8 Medical Device QSR? Option A. Approach 1, as the QSR primarily mandates comprehensive and clear documentation, and enhancing this documentation is the most direct way to ensure compliance. Option B. Approach 1, as it directly tackles the observed issue of inconsistent adherence by providing more explicit instructions, which is a key function of a QMS. Option C. Approach 2, as it focuses on employee training and feedback, which are important but secondary to the core requirement of having a well-defined and documented QMS. Option D. Approach 2, as it addresses the root cause of non-adherence by fostering understanding and engagement, which is central to a functional QMS designed for consistent quality and continuous improvement. Correct answer is D. Approach 2, as it addresses the root cause of non-adherence by fostering understanding and engagement, which is central to a functional QMS designed for consistent quality and continuous improvement. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing, ensuring that the quality management system, QMS, is not merely a documented set of procedures but a living, breathing framework that actively contributes to product safety and effectiveness. The challenge lies in the potential for a QMS to become a bureaucratic hurdle rather than a strategic asset. Professionals must discern between superficial compliance and genuine integration of quality principles into daily operations. This requires a deep understanding of the QMS's purpose, as defined by CFR Part 8, which is to ensure that devices are consistently manufactured according to quality standards. The correct approach recognizes that a QMS, as mandated by 21 CFR Part 820, is fundamentally about establishing and maintaining processes that ensure device quality throughout its life cycle. It is a system designed to prevent nonconformities, identify and correct them when they occur, and drive continuous improvement. This approach aligns with the core intent of the QSR, which is to safeguard public health by ensuring that medical devices are safe and effective. The purpose of the QMS is to provide a framework for achieving these goals, not simply to satisfy regulatory inspection. Incorrect approaches fail to grasp the fundamental purpose of a QMS. One incorrect approach might view the QMS as solely a documentation exercise, a collection of binders and electronic files that must be present for an audit. This is a critical regulatory failure because it divorces the documented system from actual practice, leading to potential gaps in quality control and a lack of accountability. Another incorrect approach might see the QMS as a reactive mechanism, only to be engaged when a problem arises. This is also a regulatory failure, as the QMS is intended to be proactive, with built-in controls and monitoring to prevent issues before they manifest. A third incorrect approach might focus on the QMS as a cost center, a burden that needs to be minimized. This is an ethical and professional failure, as it prioritizes short-term financial gains over the long-term safety and efficacy of medical devices, which is the ultimate ethical responsibility of any medical device manufacturer. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the regulatory definition and purpose of a QMS under CFR Part 8. This involves recognizing that the QMS is an integrated system encompassing all aspects of the device lifecycle, from design and development to manufacturing, distribution, and post-market surveillance. Professionals should then evaluate proposed actions against this fundamental understanding, asking, does this action support the consistent production of safe and effective devices? And does this action contribute to the continuous improvement of our quality processes? This analytical framework ensures that decisions are rooted in regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility, rather than expediency or superficial adherence. Question 15. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing enhanced environmental controls for particulate matter in the cleanroom or sterile implantable devices are manufactured would significantly increase operational expenses. However, the risk assessment indicates a low but non-negligible probability of particulate contamination, impacting device sterility and patient safety. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, for environmental controls? Option A. Defer implementation of enhanced controls, citing the low probability of contamination and the significant cost increase, and rely on existing general cleanroom protocols that are not specifically validated for this device class. Option B. Focus solely on post-manufacturing inspection to detect any potential particulate contamination, as this is a more cost-effective method of quality assurance than proactive environmental controls. Option C. Adopt environmental controls that are standard for non-sterile, non-implantable devices, as this represents a reasonable compromise between cost and a general level of environmental oversight. Option D. Implement enhanced environmental controls for particulate matter, as the potential risk to patient safety outweighs the increased operational costs, ensuring compliance with the QSR's mandate for controls that affect product quality. The correct answer is D. Implement enhanced environmental controls for particulate matter, as the potential risk to patient safety outweighs the increased operational costs, ensuring compliance with the QSR's mandate for controls that affect product quality. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing, where a balance must be struck between operational efficiency and stringent quality control, specifically concerning environmental controls. The challenge lies in interpreting the vagueness of suitable environmental controls within CFR Part 8, which requires a risk-based approach to ensure product safety and effectiveness. Overly stringent controls can be costly and impractical, while insufficient controls can lead to product contamination and regulatory noncompliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment to determine the specific environmental controls necessary for the particular device and manufacturing process. This aligns with the Quality System Regulation, QSR, which mandates that manufacturers establish and maintain procedures to control environmental conditions that could affect product quality. The QSR does not prescribe specific environmental parameters for all devices, but requires manufacturers to define and validate these controls based on the device's intended use, potential risks, and the manufacturing process. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical environmental factors, thereby protecting patient safety and meeting regulatory expectations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing generic one-size-fits-all environmental controls without considering the specific device and its manufacturing process is incorrect because it may be unnecessarily costly or, more critically, insufficient to prevent contamination or degradation. This fails to meet the QSR's requirement for controls tailored to the specific risks. Focusing solely on cost reduction by minimizing environmental controls, even if seemingly compliant on the surface, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. The QSR prioritizes product quality and patient safety over cost savings. Such an approach risks product defects, recalls, and potential harm to patients, leading to severe regulatory penalties. Adopting controls based on industry best practices from unrelated device classes without a specific risk assessment for the current device is also incorrect. While industry practices can inform decisions, they are not a substitute for a device-specific risk analysis mandated by the QSR. This can lead to either inadequate or excessive controls, both of which are suboptimal and potentially non-compliant. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying potential environmental hazards relevant to the device and its manufacturing process. 2. Assessing the risk associated with each hazard, likelihood and severity of impact on product quality and patient safety. 3. Determining appropriate control measures based on the assessed risks, considering both effectiveness and feasibility. 4. Documenting the risk assessment and the rationale for chosen controls. 5. Validating the effectiveness of implemented controls. This systematic approach ensures compliance with CFR Part 8 while optimizing resource allocation and safeguarding product integrity. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that a medical device manufacturer has received multiple customer complaints alleging a specific, potentially serious, malfunction in a widely distributed device. While the immediate financial impact of a full investigation and potential recall would be substantial, the quality assurance team has identified preliminary data suggesting a possible systemic issue. What is the most appropriate course of action for the manufacturer to ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, and uphold ethical responsibilities? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive investigation into the reported malfunctions, including root cause analysis, and prepare for potential corrective actions or a recall as dictated by the findings, while also fulfilling all reporting requirements under 21 CFR Part 8. Option B. Address the complaints on a case-by-case basis by providing individual customer support and troubleshooting, without initiating a formal investigation or reporting the trend to regulatory authorities, to avoid unnecessary alarm and operational disruption. Option C. Temporarily halt further distribution of the device and conduct a limited internal review to assess the severity of the complaints, deferring a full investigation and external reporting until more definitive evidence of a widespread problem emerges. Option D. Implement a minor product modification based on anecdotal feedback to mitigate the reported symptoms, without formally documenting the investigation process or the rationale for the modification, to expedite a resolution and minimize immediate costs. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive investigation into the reported malfunctions, including root cause analysis, and prepare for potential corrective actions or a recall as dictated by the findings, while also fulfilling all reporting requirements under 21 CFR Part 8. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma for a medical device manufacturer, where a potential quality issue has been identified during post-market surveillance. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate financial implications of a recall or corrective action against the paramount ethical and regulatory obligation to protect patient safety and maintain product integrity. The pressure to avoid costly disruptions and reputational damage can create a conflict of interest, requiring careful judgment rooted in regulatory compliance and ethical principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate reporting and investigation of the potential quality issue as mandated by 21 CFR Part 8. This aligns with the fundamental principle of the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR, to ensure that devices are safe and effective for their intended use. Promptly addressing potential nonconformances, including those identified post-market, is crucial for fulfilling the manufacturer's responsibility under 21 CFR 820, 100 COPPA, and 21 CFR 820, 198, complaint handling. Failure to do so not only violates regulatory requirements, but also poses a significant risk to public health, undermining the trust placed in medical device manufacturers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying or downplaying the identified issue to avoid the costs and disruptions associated with a formal investigation or potential recall. This directly violates the spirit and letter of the QSR, particularly the requirements for complaint handling and corrective and preventive action. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the duty of care to patients and a disregard for the regulatory framework designed to ensure device safety. Such an action can lead to continued patient harm, severe regulatory penalties, and irreparable damage to the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial investigation that does not fully explore the root cause of the potential issue. This circumvents the intent of 21 CFR 820(100), which mandates a thorough investigation to identify and eliminate the cause of nonconformances. Ethically, it is a deceptive practice that fails to address the underlying problem, potentially allowing the issue to persist and affect more patients. This approach demonstrates a lack of commitment to continuous improvement in product quality, which are core tenets of the QSR. A third incorrect approach might be to implement a corrective action that is not adequately validated or documented, or to only address the immediate symptom rather than the root cause. This falls short of the comprehensive requirements for COPPA under 21 CFR 820(100). Ethically, it is a disingenuous attempt to appear compliant without truly resolving the problem. This can lead to recurring issues, further patient risk, and regulatory scrutiny for inadequate corrective actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should first consult the relevant sections of 21 CFR Part 8, specifically focusing on complaint handling, 21 CFR 820(198), corrective and preventive action, 21 CFR 820(100), and management responsibility, 21 CFR 820(5). The decision-making process should involve a cross-functional team, including quality assurance, regulatory affairs, engineering, and legal counsel. The primary consideration must always be patient safety and regulatory compliance. A risk-based approach, as outlined in the QSR, should guide the investigation and subsequent actions. Transparency with regulatory bodies when required is also a critical component of professional practice. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows that a quality assurance auditor is tasked with reviewing the design history file, DHF, for a medical device that has been in production for over 15 years. The original design team is no longer employed by the company, and the company has undergone several system upgrades since the device's initial release. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with the Medical Device Quality System Regulation, QSR, regarding access and retrieval of this critical documentation? Option A. Assume that since the device is legacy, the DHF is no longer a priority for retrieval and can be accessed on an ad hoc basis if specifically requested by senior management. Option B. Attempt to reconstruct the DHF by gathering information from various departments and current employees, as the original documentation may be incomplete or difficult to locate. Option C. Initiate a formal documented request through the company's established document control system, specifying the need for the legacy DHF, and follow the documented procedure for retrieving archived records, even if it requires engaging with personnel responsible for historical data management. Option D. Rely on the current product manager's recollection of the DHF's general contents and location, as they have been with the company for several years and can likely provide a summary. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal documented request through the company's established document control system, specifying the need for the legacy DHF, and follow the documented procedure for retrieving archived records, even if it requires engaging with personnel responsible for historical data management. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a quality assurance auditor needs to access historical design history files, DHF, for a legacy medical device. This presents a professional challenge because the device has been on the market for a significant period, and the original personnel involved in its design and documentation may no longer be with the company. Ensuring timely and accurate retrieval of these critical documents, while maintaining their integrity and confidentiality, is paramount for regulatory compliance and patient safety. The auditor's ability to access and retrieve these documents directly impacts the assessment of the device's compliance with the Quality System Regulation, QSR. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for locating and retrieving the required DHFs. This includes understanding the company's document control system, identifying the physical or electronic location of legacy records, and following established procedures for requesting and accessing them. This approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, specifically concerning document control and record retention. The QSR mandates that manufacturers establish and maintain procedures to ensure that documents are current, approved, and accessible. For legacy devices, this means having a robust system that can still retrieve historical information, even if the original format or storage method has changed. Ethical considerations also dictate that such critical patient safety information must be readily available for review. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal requests or verbal assurances from current employees who may have incomplete or inaccurate recollections of the DHF's location or content. This fails to meet the QSR's requirement for documented procedures and verifiable access. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to access the DHFs without proper authorization or by bypassing established security protocols, which would violate confidentiality and potentially compromise the integrity of the records. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that because the device is legacy, the DHF is no longer relevant or accessible, leading to a failure to retrieve necessary documentation for an audit. This directly contravenes the QSR's expectation that records are maintained for a specified period and are retrievable. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a thorough understanding of the QSR's requirements for document control and record retention. It involves proactive planning to ensure that legacy documentation is preserved and accessible. When faced with a retrieval challenge, a professional should first consult the company's documented procedures for record retrieval. If these procedures are insufficient or unclear for legacy records, the professional should escalate the issue to management to ensure appropriate action is taken to locate and preserve the necessary documentation, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and ethical responsibilities. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a low probability and low impact for a specific deviation identified during a batch record review, indicating a minor deviation from a standard operating procedure. However, this same deviation has been observed in 2 previous unrelated batches within the last 6 months. What is the most appropriate regulatory action according to 21 CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR? Option A. Document the deviation and close the issue, as the risk matrix indicates a low overall risk. Option B. Escalate the deviation to senior management for a decision on whether to proceed with further investigation. Option C. Initiate a corrective and preventive action CAPA to investigate the root cause of the recurring deviation and implement appropriate controls. Option D. Address the deviation with a simple retraining of the personnel involved in the batch record review. The correct answer is C. Initiate a corrective and preventive action, CAPA, to investigate the root cause of the recurring deviation and implement appropriate controls. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the corrective and preventive actions, CAPA system, as defined by 21 CFR Part 8. The challenge lies in distinguishing between a minor deviation that might be addressed through routine quality control and a systemic issue requiring a formal CAPA investigation. The risk matrix, while a tool for prioritization, does not absolve the quality unit of its responsibility to thoroughly investigate potential nonconformities. The decision-making process must balance efficiency with regulatory compliance and patient safety. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the principles of 21 CFR Part 820, which mandates that each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures for identifying, documenting, reviewing, segregating, and disposing of nonconforming product. Furthermore, 21 CFR Part 820A(1) requires that any deviation from the procedures shall be documented and reviewed. By initiating a CAPA, the manufacturer acknowledges the potential for a systemic issue, even if the immediate impact appears minor. This proactive stance ensures that the root cause is identified and addressed, preventing recurrence and upholding the integrity of the quality system, which is paramount for patient safety and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the low-risk score on the matrix and closes the issue without a formal CAPA investigation fails to meet the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. This represents a regulatory failure because it bypasses the established procedure for handling nonconformities and potential systemic issues. Ethically, it is a failure to adequately protect patient safety by not thoroughly investigating a potential problem that could have broader implications. Another incorrect approach might be to address the issue through a simple training update without a root cause analysis. This is a regulatory failure as it does not fulfill the requirement to identify and correct the root cause of the nonconformity, as stipulated in 21 CFR Part 8. 20A.2, which states, "The corrective and preventive action program shall identify, analyze, and correct the causes of nonconformities relating to the product." Ethically, it is a failure to implement robust quality controls. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of any deviation against the established quality system procedures and regulatory requirements. This includes 1. Documenting the deviation. 2. Assessing the immediate impact on product quality and patient safety. 3. Evaluating whether the deviation indicates a potential systemic issue or a breakdown in established procedures. 4. Consulting the risk management documentation, but not relying on it as the sole determinant for initiating a CAPA. 5. Initiating a formal CAPA investigation when there is any doubt about the systemic nature of the issue or when the deviation suggests a potential for recurrence or broader impact. 6. Ensuring that all actions taken are thoroughly documented and reviewed by the quality unit. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal that a software update intended to enhance the diagnostic accuracy of an in vitro diagnostic medical device has inadvertently introduced a subtle but measurable increase in processing time for certain complex sample types. The manufacturer has conducted internal tests demonstrating that the new processing time still falls within the previously established acceptable limits for overall device throughput, but the specific time for these complex samples is now closer to the upper bound of that limit. What is the most appropriate regulatory action under CFR Part 8, Medical Device QSR, regarding design verification and validation for this software update? Option A. Rely on the internal tests showing the processing time remains within the overall acceptable limits for device throughput, and proceed with the software release without further formal verification or validation activities. Option B. Perform only re-verification of the software update against the updated performance specifications, as the overall device throughput has not been negatively impacted. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive revalidation study to confirm the device continues to meet all user needs and intended uses with the updated processing time, and re-verify that the software update meets all specified design inputs, documenting all activities and results in the design history file. Option D. Conduct a limited set of user testing with a small group of internal personnel to confirm they can still operate the device effectively with a slightly longer processing time for complex samples. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive revalidation study to confirm the device continues to meet all user needs and intended uses with the updated processing time, and re-verify that the software update meets all specified design inputs, documenting all activities and results in the design history file. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device development where a design change, intended to improve performance, introduces potential risks that were not fully addressed during initial validation. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of re-verification and revalidation required by CFR Part 8, specifically the Quality System Regulation, QSR, to ensure the device remains safe and effective after the modification. The pressure to release a product quickly can conflict with the rigorous requirements of design controls. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the design change's impact on the device's intended use, performance, and safety. This assessment, documented as part of the design history file, DHF, dictates the necessary re-verification and revalidation activities. According to 21 CFR 820:30I, design verification and validation must be performed on the design. When a design change is made, the manufacturer must determine if the change affects the device's specifications or performance. If it does, then appropriate verification and validation activities must be performed to ensure the device still meets its predetermined specifications and user needs. This systematic approach ensures compliance with the QSR's emphasis on maintaining device safety and effectiveness throughout the product lifecycle. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the change is minor and intended to improve performance, no further validation is needed. This fails to acknowledge that even seemingly minor changes can have unforeseen consequences on device performance, safety, or usability, which are all critical aspects of validation under 21 CFR 820. 30. F and G. Another incorrect approach is to only perform re-verification without revalidation. Design verification confirms that the design outputs meet the design inputs, 21 CFR 820. 30. F. While design validation confirms that the device meets user needs and intended uses, 21 CFR 820. 30. G. A performance improvement might be verified against updated specifications, but if it impacts how the user interacts with the device or its overall effectiveness in a clinical setting, revalidation is essential. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence from a few internal tests rather than conducting formal, documented verification and validation studies. The QSR requires objective evidence of compliance. Informal testing does not constitute adequate verification or validation and would not be sufficient to demonstrate that the device meets its intended uses and user needs, nor that it meets its design inputs. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach to design changes. The first step is to conduct a thorough impact assessment of the change. This assessment should consider the potential effects on all aspects of the device, including performance, safety, usability, and regulatory compliance. Based on this assessment, a plan for necessary re-verification and revalidation activities should be developed and documented. This plan should be executed rigorously and the results documented in the DHF. This systematic process ensures that the device remains compliant with 21 CFR Part 8 and continues to meet user needs and intended uses, thereby upholding patient safety and product quality. Question 20. Assessment of a medical device manufacturer's quality management system implementation strategy, which aims to achieve compliance with the U.S. FDA's quality system regulation, 21 CFR Part 820, while also seeking international market access through alignment with ISO 13485, presents a critical implementation challenge. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and operational effectiveness? Option A. Create a quality management system based solely on 21 CFR Part 820 without incorporating any elements or considerations from ISO 13485 to strictly adhere to U.S. regulations. Option B. Implement a quality management system that is fully compliant with ISO 13485, assuming this automatically satisfies all requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Option C. Develop and maintain a quality management system that demonstrably meets all applicable requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, leveraging ISO 13485 as a framework to enhance efficiency and international harmonization where it does not conflict with or omit QSR mandates. Option D. Implement only those aspects of 21 CFR Part 820 that are explicitly covered by ISO 13485, disregarding QSR requirements not directly mirrored in the international standard. The correct answer is B. Implement a quality management system that is fully compliant with ISO 13485, assuming this automatically satisfies all requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge for medical device manufacturers operating under the U.S. FDA's Quality System Regulation, QSR, codified in 21 CFR Part 820. The challenge lies in reconciling the specific requirements of the QSR with the broader, internationally recognized standard of ISO 13485. While ISO 13485 is often adopted as a framework for quality management systems, it is not a direct substitute for the QSR. Manufacturers must understand that compliance with ISO 13485 does not automatically equate to compliance with the QSR. The QSR is a legally binding regulation in the United States, enforced by the FDA, and contains specific requirements that may not be explicitly detailed or may be interpreted differently within ISO 13485. The professional challenge is to ensure that the quality system, even if aligned with ISO 13485, demonstrably meets all the mandatory provisions of 21 CFR Part 820. This requires a thorough gap analysis and a clear understanding of where the two frameworks align and diverge, particularly concerning FDA's expectations for documentation, record-keeping, and specific process controls. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing and implementing a quality management system that demonstrably meets all the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, while leveraging ISO 13485 as a foundational element. This means that while the manufacturer may choose to align their system with ISO 13485 for international market access or efficiency, they must ensure that every applicable requirement of 21 CFR Part 820 is addressed and documented within their system. This often involves augmenting the ISO 13485 base system with specific procedures, records, and controls that satisfy the QSR's mandates, such as detailed complaint handling, adverse event reporting, and design control documentation as interpreted by the FDA. The key is to ensure that the system is robust enough to pass FDA inspections, which focus on adherence to the QSR. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes regulatory compliance with the governing authority, FDA, while also potentially achieving broader quality management objectives. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that full compliance with ISO 13485 automatically satisfies all requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. This is a significant regulatory failure. While there is considerable overlap, ISO 13485 is a voluntary standard, whereas 21 CFR Part 820 is a mandatory regulation. The FDA's interpretation and enforcement of the QSR may differ from the broader guidance provided by ISO 13485. For example, specific documentation requirements for design history files or the depth of complaint investigation might be more stringent under the QSR than what a manufacturer might implement solely based on ISO 13485. Another incorrect approach is to implement a quality system that is solely based on 21 CFR Part 820 without considering the benefits of international standards like ISO 13485. While this would ensure QSR compliance, it could create inefficiencies and hinder global market access, as many other regulatory bodies and customers expect adherence to ISO 13485. This approach is professionally suboptimal, as it misses opportunities for streamlined quality management and international harmonization. A third incorrect approach is to selectively implement parts of 21 CFR Part 820 that are also covered by ISO 13485, while ignoring QSR requirements that are not explicitly mirrored in ISO 13485. This is a direct violation of the QSR and represents a critical regulatory failure. The QSR is a comprehensive set of requirements, and any omission, even if seemingly minor or not directly addressed by ISO 13485, can lead to non-compliance and potential enforcement actions by the FDA. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based and compliance-driven approach. When faced with multiple regulatory frameworks, the primary focus must always be on meeting the mandatory legal requirements of the jurisdiction in which the device will be marketed. In this case, 21 CFR Part 820 is the absolute priority for devices sold in the U.S. The decision-making process should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. 2. Identifying the requirements of ISO 13485 and assessing the overlap and gaps with the QSR. 3. Developing a quality management system that explicitly addresses all applicable QSR requirements, using ISO 13485 as a guide for best practices where it enhances QSR compliance or facilitates international operations. 4. Conducting regular internal audits and management reviews specifically focused on QSR compliance, in addition to broader quality system reviews. 5. Staying updated on FDA guidance documents and interpretations related to the QSR.